Thanks so much for coming to the Leroy Collins Leon County Library's Family History webinar. My name is Nellie Spears Barron. I'm a librarian at the Dr. B.L. Perry Jr. branch. And this is Shauna.
Hi, I'm Shauna. I am a librarian at the main branch on downtown.
And we're thrilled to have Josh Goodman, archives historian who works at the Florida Memory Project for the State Archives of Florida. And he's back for part 2 of Land Records. And Josh will be taking us through how to use publicly available resources to trace ownership of land back through history. And if you have questions, you can type them into the Q&A. And Josh has built some pauses into his presentation for answering throughout the talk. And as a heads up, we'll be recording this session for possible inclusion on the Leon County Library's social media, and part 1 is available on Leon County Library's YouTube site. And after the talk, we'll just have a few announcements. So Josh, feel free to take it away.
All right, thank you very much for Nellie and Shauna for having me back again for part 2 of our program on using land documents in family history research. Pleased to be back with you today. I hope, I see we've got a couple of folks that were with us for part 1, so I'm glad you came back for a second helping. And I hope that this proves useful to you in sort of putting some of the things we talked about last time into practice. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Well, host has disabled participant screen sharing, so if somebody will let me get me to where I can share this screen, I'll throw a PowerPoint slide up here and we'll go ahead and kick off. Let me know.
You should be good to go now.
All right, I am. And there we go. All right, allegedly I'm screen sharing. Can you see my slide here?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Now, we talked a little bit last time about the services that we offer at the State Library, so I won't go through all this again. Just in case we have anybody new, the State Archives is located right here in Tallahassee. Of course, we're closed right now because of the ongoing pandemic, but when we are open, we do function very much like a public library. You can come in and do research. A lot of the resources we're going to talk about today, you wouldn't need to come in to do research, but we'd still love for you to drop by and look at the things that that are not available online, and also to get help from our reference desk as well, if you'd like to sit down in front of somebody to get help rather than just have an email or phone conversation. We're always glad to do that. Let's see. So last time, when we talked last time in part 1 of this program, we went through 3 major steps. We talked about the different kinds of documentation of land ownership. We looked at federal land patents, where people acquire their property directly from the federal government. We talked about state land patents, where people acquire their land, the title to their land directly through the state government. And then we also talked about private land transactions, those deeds and tax sales, where the records are kept at the county courthouse. So we focused most of our conversation last time on where you find these particular documents, where you actually can trace where your ancestors actually own land. The part that we didn't get to is, how do you actually locate this land in real space? So let's, and we also, of course, talked a little bit about some of the quirkier ways that people get land in Florida, and that's the Spanish land grants and also the Armed Occupation Act. Now, if you're interested in, if you weren't here for part 1 and you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, part 1 is available, I understand, on the Leon County Public Library's website, and I'll let Shauna and Nellie tell you exactly how to get to that, but that is available online already. And so now let's talk a little bit about locating land in real space. So you are in luck. Pretty much every document, well, really every document, that every deed, every land patent, every deed, one of the key pieces of information that's in that document is a legal description of the property that is being conveyed in that document, the legal description. And what that legal description does is it essentially gives you a relative location of that parcel of land within something we call the Public Land Survey System. The Public Land Survey System. And what that system is it's a system of land description that has been used ever since the 1780s to identify the location of land in the places that the United States possessed after the 13 original colonies. It does not include land in the original 13 colonies, unfortunately, because all of that land ownership had already all that land had already been claimed by somebody before the United States became an entity. And so each of those British colonies, they established their own system for measuring land. And Georgia, for example, and South Carolina and a few others, they used a system called metes and bounds. But when the United States started expanding into other parts of the North American continent, they decided to come up with a little bit more logical system of describing exactly where a piece of land was located when they deeded it out to somebody. And so that's what we're going to learn how to use today. Now, what I've got up on the screen right now is this is an example of one of those federal land patents that we talked about last time. This is when the federal government grants title to a piece of land that has never been owned by a private individual ever before, and they patent it out to somebody for the first time. And of course, you know, it's coming from the president, and it's got, you know, it's got all this, it's got the name of the owner, it's got the amount of land that's in there and all this good stuff. But the part I have highlighted is the part that's going to allow us to locate where exactly this piece of land was in real space. Okay, you'll see that the way the sentence goes is it says, whereas this guy Nicholas Branch has deposited a certificate showing that he's paid all the money for a piece of land described as the following: the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of section 7 in township 2 north of range 2 east in the district of land subject to sale at Tallahassee, Florida, territory containing 40 acres and 17/100ths of an acre. That sounds like complete gibberish, but what I'm going to show you today is how to turn that gibberish. It's actually a very logical system, and I'm going to show you how to actually locate that in real space. But first, let's say just a little bit about how the public land survey system works. So the way the public land survey system works is when the United States would acquire a new piece of territory somewhere on the North American continent. Like, say, for example, when the United States acquired Florida in 1821. One of the first things that they want to do is they want to be able to sell or auction land off to people as quickly as possible. And the reason for that is that land is taxable. Land is taxable, and that means that, you know, once a bunch of people have land, they're going to be, you know, they're going to have to pay taxes on that land, and that helps build a tax base for the state government. Also, the state is oftentimes granted land or a territory, in the case of Florida prior to 1845. You know, that territory or that state is going to be able to sell land that's granted to it by the federal government, and the proceeds from the sale of that land also goes into the state treasury or the territorial treasury. So because that money is needed to sort of get the territory on its feet, or the new state on its feet, that's one of the first priorities of any new territory or any new state in the United States, is to get that land, get it to where you can sell land to people. To do that, you've got to have a way to describe where the land is located. Now, some of you are thinking, well, why didn't they just use latitude and longitude? You know, they've got sextants and they've got compasses, and, you know, they should be able to just use latitude and longitude. Well, it is true that they did have the materials to calculate latitude and longitude at this time, but it wasn't exact enough to actually get you to as precise a measurement of where a boundary should be, so that it wouldn't just become a complete mess in a court of law. So an actual, you know, sort of real latitude and longitude coordinate-based system of land description was not possible in the 19th century and the late 18th century, when the United States was first facing this problem. And so the next best thing that they came up with was this grid system. If any of you remember geometry class from when you're in high school or middle school, and you would have that cross there, and you know, on graph paper, and they would say, okay, we're going to chart some coordinates now, those XY coordinates, where you go over 3 and up 4 or something like that. Essentially, that's what the public land survey system was designed to be. Let's take a look at the map on the slide for just a moment. I'll explain to you a little bit about how that works. Let me get my pen going. So what they did here is when the public land survey system was being developed in Florida, they said, all right, we're going to choose a central point. They happen to choose a point in, you're going to recognize the point. And if any of you have been to Cascades Park recently, since they did the renovations, you're going to be very amazed by sort of what they did to sort of celebrate this particular point. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So they chose this very specific central point, and they drew a straight line all the way across the state, or the territory at that time, east and west from that point, and that became what was called the baseline, the Tallahassee baseline. And then they drew a line north and south, and that became what was called the Tallahassee meridian. And in a sense, what they did with this was they created that same plane, that same sheet of coordinates that you remember from geometry class, where you go over 2, up 1, or over 2, down 2, or something like that. But instead, what this was going to become is the basis of a grid system to actually describe where land is located in real space. And here's the cool thing about it. Not only does it describe every single piece of land in the entire state of Florida at the time the system was being put in, we still use this exact same system to describe the location of land today. So this grid system that these land surveyors put in back in the 1820s and perfected over the course of the 1800s, you can still use that exact same system today. That has the legal force of law to describe where your land is located in 2020, which is pretty cool. So just to say a little bit more about this, so the point of beginning for this survey is actually right in the middle of Cascades Park. If you've ever gone to Cascades Park and you see this beautiful plaza where they've got this nice little, I think this is marble actually that they've got in here. They've got this nice little thing in the state of Florida, and they've got all the counties listed. And then they've got this funny little medallion right over Tallahassee. And again, it just looks like a bunch of gibberish here. But this spot right in the middle of that medallion is actually the point of beginning for the grid into which every parcel of land in the state of Florida is measured into. Every piece of land that is bought and sold in the state of Florida, all the way from Pensacola to Key West, is described in relation to this exact point in Cascades Park in Tallahassee. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. Okay, so this is an example of this map I think is from like the 1840s or something like that. And actually a little bit later based on the railroads there. But anyway, what this map is doing is this is actually showing you what the state of Florida looked like once it had been measured out into the grid system that is based on that point there in Cascades Park. The first thing they did is surveyors went out and they measured these the land out into townships, these 36-mile square townships. Okay, 36 miles square. Why 36? I'll tell you in just a minute. Okay, and so what they've done is they've got it. You can see that's what the big squares are on this map. Okay, these are all 36-mile square townships. All right, and each township has within it 36 individual 1 mile square sections. And they're numbered just like this. Don't ask me why they chose this order of the sections. It makes absolutely no sense to me, but that's how they do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way down to 36. Okay, and every township in the state has its sections measured just like that. Now, the ones on the coast, oftentimes the section pushes out into the Gulf, and so they just didn't measure those sections. But they still measured all the sections that were on land in relation to this grid system, this 36-mile section system here. Okay, so they've measured out all these townships and all these sections. And then, and then within each section, within each individual 1 mile square section, they actually have it to where, because each one is exactly the same size, it's 1 square mile, okay? Each one square mile is 640 acres, 640 acres. And then because that section, every section is a square, it can be divided logically into pieces. that are the same no matter which section you're in. Now, we've long since stopped dividing things into these very predictable amounts. But this is why when you're looking through all those federal land patents and state land patents and deeds from back in the 1800s, that's why all your ancestors have the same amount of land. They've got 40 acres or 80 acres or 320 acres. It's always the same number. And the reason for that is because back in those days, you didn't have professional land surveyors putting in all these crazy lines at diagonals and you know, circles and all this crazy stuff like that. That did not exist. When land was sold, it was almost exclusively sold in blocks, in these very square or rectangular blocks based on the very predictable dimensions of these individual sections. So what I've got here is a diagram. If you wanted to buy a half section and get 320 acres, then that was pretty easy for a surveyor to lay out. They would just go to the corner of the section that you purchased half of, and they'd be like, all right, here's one corner of it. And then they go all the way to the other end of the section and say, okay, here's another corner. And then they go halfway to the opposite boundary of that section and say, okay, that's one. And then all the way up to the top section line of that section. And then there, they've got your four corners, boom, boom, boom. So it's a very predictable system, and you didn't have to have a whole lot of training to be able to measure this out, because all of the lines in between these four red dots that I just put on here, they're going to be the same no matter which section you're in anywhere in the entire state of Florida. So you could buy 320 acres if you're a rich high roller and you're going to buy a bunch of land to maybe build a plantation. Or maybe you're just kind of a small freehold farmer and you're just kind of buying a small piece of land for a farm for yourself and your immediate family. That's going to be the much more common 40-acre block, which is a quarter of a section. So see, if you look over here in the blue piece is going to be a half of a section. A red piece over here is going to be a quarter of a section. This yellow piece that I've got over here is going to be a quarter of a section. And then the green piece that I've got right here is going to be a half of a quarter of a section. Now, that's a tongue twister, but it's going to be important because when you read these legal descriptions in the deeds and the land patents belonging to your ancestors or on a tax roll or something like that, that's the way the land is going to be described. If you go back to that legal description that we were looking at earlier, it says that this guy is being sold the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of a particular section. Once you understand how this system of describing land works, you'll be able to find that exactly. Okay, so let's, sometimes the best way to do this is to actually do it in practice. The one thing I want to do first is I wanted to explain how they describe where the townships are. Okay, because unlike your geometry class, we're not actually measuring points in this system. We're actually measuring blocks. So, you know, whereas in geometry class, you might be concerned with where the individual points are on the grid. This time around, we're going to actually worry about the blocks. So let me show you how it goes. The township, when you see a description of land that says, well, I'm in township 2 south, 1 east, okay? Township, what township you're in is a description of how far north or south of the baseline you are in the public land survey system. Okay, so I think the example that I said there was 2 south, 1 east. I'm going to write it here in very bad PowerPoint handwriting here with my pen here so I can remember the example that I'm giving you. 2 south, 1 east. All right. So if township is a measure of how far south or north you are from the baseline in the public land survey system, okay, that means that I am going to go 2 tiers south of the point of beginning. This is the baseline right here. And so if I'm looking at a piece of land in 2 south, 1 east, township 2 south, range 1 east, then I'm going to go down 2 townships from the point of beginning. See the 2 right here? Okay, so now I know that I'm dealing with something that is in township 2 tiers south of the point of beginning. All right, and this piece of land that I'm talking about is in range 1 east. So that means I'm going to be 1 range east, 1 block east of the point of beginning. Okay, look at the map. 1 east, 2 east, 3 east, 1 west, 2 west, 3 west. And this system keeps going all the way as far east and west as you can go, all the way to the Perdido River in the west, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean in the east, and then north to the Georgia border, south to as far as you can go in Key West. So if I'm looking at something in 1 east, then that means that I'm going to be looking in this tier right here. So Township 2 south, 1 east, this is the block of land right here. This is the block of land right here that I'm talking about, that piece. So let's take it one step farther. Let's just use the parcel that we started out with as an example. Let's say that I wanted to locate exactly where in real space this piece of land is. The northwest quarter, the northeast quarter of Section 7, Township 2 north, Range 2 east. Here we go. All right, and I've got the legal description right over here so that because I knew I didn't want to write that much in red pen. All right, so here we go. The northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 7, Township 2 north, Range 2 east. My advice to you is do it backwards. When you see a legal description like this, work backwards from the end of the description back to the beginning, and that's going to help you out. So first thing we need to do is figure out Range 2 east. All right, here we go. Range 2 east. That's 2 tiers away from the point of beginning. All right. Now, Township 2 north, 1, 2. All right, so that means that we are looking at this block of land right here, this township. It's weird. We call it a township, even though every township has both a township number and a range number. Don't ask me why they did it that way, but that's how they did it. All right, so this is Township 2 north, 2 east. Next thing we need to do is we need to figure out which section we're talking about. All right, Section 7. I can use, remember, this is the standard arrangement of sections for every township in the entire state of Florida. So I know that this right here, this is the section that I'm looking for to get this person's land. So if I were to count on this map, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and if you're wondering, am I really going to have to use a map from the 1840s to figure out where my ancestors' land is? No, you're not, but we're doing it the hard way first so that you'll understand how it works. All right, so this is the section right here. Wow, he lived kind of close to Miccosukee. Look at that. Okay, that is the section right there that this guy's land is located. But wait a minute, we can do better than that. We already know he lives close to Miccosukee. That's pretty cool, but we can actually do better than that. We can actually figure out where the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of that section is, because we know about that system of parts that goes into it. That system, by the way, is called aliquot parts. Aliquot, A-L-I-Q-U-O-T. So here we go. We're looking for the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 7. Again, this will get far less confusing if you work backwards. We've been working backwards so far to get to this. Let's keep doing that. So I've drawn a little grid up here. This is a little just hand-drawn grid of Section 7, right here next to Miccosukee. This is Section 7. And I know that I need to be looking in the northeast quarter of that section, okay? And remember, because all these sections are divided up into squares here, this is all going to be very logical and easy to find. So if I look in the northeastern quarter, right here, the last part that I need to decode is, he bought the entire northwest quarter of that. So I've marked in blue right here, the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of Section 7. So this is that guy's piece of land. I can't remember what his name is. What was his name? Nicholas Branch. So that was Nicholas Branch's piece of land. He was the first guy after the United States acquisition of Florida to own that exact piece of land. Now, with that information, we could go to the property appraiser's website and we could zoom in on their map and find that particular section, and we could find that particular quarter, and we could actually go and see exactly who lives there now. Okay, so why don't we actually do that? That's a good example there. You've now seen how we go from a legal description on a federal land patent, and this could be done with anything. You could do this with the deed to your own property if you have it. If you could do it with a state land patent. You could do it with an entry in a tax roll. If you were looking at an old tax roll, from 100 years ago or 50 years ago or 150 years ago, and there's a legal description there of a piece of land that your ancestor owned, you could use that description of the land, follow the same process to find the township, then find the section, and then the piece of the section, and voila, you'll be able to locate that land in real space. So let me stop right there for just a second and see if there are any questions. Are there any questions? I see 2 questions in chat here. Oh, no, actually, that's just locations for part 1. So that's great. It looks like Shauna has put the link to part 1 on the Leon County website here. Does anybody have any questions about the process of going from a legal description on a deed or a land patent and actually figuring out where that's located in the public land survey system? I'm going to show you another system for locating that here in just a minute, but I wanted to at least show you logically how that works. I'm not seeing any questions pop up, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the next piece. So what let's do now is let's talk about how to actually figure out what is in that location now. What is in that location now? So there's a couple of different systems you can use depending on what county you're doing research in. Now, we're pretty lucky in Leon County in that our property appraiser's website is very good here. And many of the counties are now starting to put everything online in a very logical system that's easy to search. You can either put in a name, or you can put in a legal description, or you can actually look at a map and find what you're looking for. So we're going to look at 2 different ways to figure out where something is located in real space now. So I'm going to share a different screen. I'm going to share my internet browser now. Could somebody let me know that you're seeing my internet browser? You should be seeing the Google Doodle right now.
We can see it.
Excellent, very good. Here we go. All right, so what we're going to do, there's 2 different choices. One of my favorite tools, and I use this a little bit in part 1 to show you how to get your hands on federal land patents. It's the land document search system of the Bureau of Land Management in the Department of the Interior for the United States. And you can get to their website. The fastest way is is to just use the direct URL, which is GLO Records, that stands for Government Land Office, glorecords.blm.gov, glorecords.blm.gov. And here we go. It takes you directly to their website. And last time we were using the land patents section to do our work, but this time around we're going to actually scroll down a little farther and look at what they call the land catalog. And if you look over here, just as an aside, if you look over here at all of the states that are in purple, these are all of the states that are measured into the public land survey system. And actually some parts of Texas are too. It's just not all of it. That's why they don't have it turned purple. But you'll notice that none of the 13 original colonies are measured into the PLSS, and neither are Kentucky or Tennessee and West Virginia and a couple others. And that's because all of these states had other systems that had been used to describe the land before the public land survey system could be used to describe all the property in that land. Alaska's in the public land survey system too, by the way. All right, so when we go into the land catalog, it's going to take us to a nice big version of this map, but it's zoomable. So here we go. And this, you'll see that overlaid on this map is a nice, pretty little satellite map that actually shows you most of the modern highways. It's even going to give you street names when you get down into Tallahassee. And you'll notice that when you get in close, they're actually giving you the township and range numbers and the section numbers. Isn't this way easier than using the old map from the 1840s and 50s? Okay, so thinking back to the legal description of that piece of property that we were looking at, it was in section 7 of, let's see, what was it? It's in, let me look real quick just to make sure I've got it right here. It's Township 2 North, Range 2 East. Township 2 North, Range 2 East. So if I scroll around here, the point of beginning is right here in Tallahassee. So that's they're right here at Cascades Park. So I know that it's going to be right up in this area. And sure enough, here we are, Township 2 North, Range 2 East. And it's in section 7. Look at that. I didn't even have to count sections like I did with the old map. And I can actually zoom in on this map, and it'll actually show me what's there now. And if you recall, the legal description of that piece of property said that it was in the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter. So the northeast quarter of section 7, they always print the number right in the middle of that section. So that means that this right here, this piece of land, this was the northeast quarter of section 7, and this would have been the northeast quarter. Not a whole lot going on there. But wait a minute, I wonder who owns that piece of property. I wonder who owns the northwest quarter of the northeast quarter of section 7. The Bureau of Land Management, Government Land Office records that we're looking at now, this is pretty good for giving you a general idea of where your ancestors' piece of land was located, maybe what road it's close to or something like that. But it's not a perfect thing. You might want something a little more detailed. And so what I would encourage you to do in that case is to look at the property appraiser's website. Okay? In Leon County, the property appraiser's website for us is leonpa.org, I believe. Yeah, leonpa.org. And you can Google the property appraiser's website for any county, and it's pretty easy to find. They all have it. Now, not every property appraiser's website works exactly the same. They don't all necessarily use the same software. They may have their website organized differently. I know this one looks a lot different from the Taylor County property appraiser's website, which I use a good bit. But the functions are going to be generally the same. What you want is this search menu. You've got some really powerful tools for determining who owns land right here and now in Leon County. You can search by address, by the name of an owner. If you happen to be working with a document that has a parcel number on it, that works. But what we want is the map search, because we know that that coordinate, that system of that description in the public land survey system. You're going to have to answer a little waiver here, promising that you understand that this is all just on the internet and you can't really use this in a court of law for something other than just research. But once we get into the system here, we're going to be able to get a look at exactly the piece of land we were looking at. Section 7, Township 2 North, Range 2 East. And I found it right here. There's section 7. Oh, look at that. Here are all the different parcels that are currently owned. This is current. They keep this very current because the property appraiser's website is always having to refresh this data. Why? Because these pieces of land all have a certain tax value associated with them. And let me tell you, whether it's the 1850s, the 1950s, or 2050s and 30 years from now, if there is one kind of record that the government will never get rid of, it's when they owe you money or you owe them money. So you can be sure that this is getting updated pretty regularly. Any of these parcels that you click on is going to give you some nice information about the parcel of land that's there. So let's see. I'm going to click on the little info thing right here, and I'm just going to click on, look at there. Okay, this is a parcel of land that's located just a little bit to the south of the northeast quarter of section 7. And I can actually determine that this is owned by a company called Prescombe Partners, LLC. And I can look here in the legal description and see that, yes, it is 10.2 acres in Township 2 North, 2 East. It's in the southwest corner of section 8, or excuse me, of section 8. Okay, there we go. But now up here, actually, no, that's not in section 8. I think that must be something else. Anyway, but here we are, and I'm going to make sure. Oh, I see what it is. I jumped over into section 8. So let me jump back over into section 7 where I'm supposed to be. I went hunting for a good parcel to look for. But anyway, it looks like all of this land up here in this part of section 7 all belongs to the same owner. See, here's the parcel number for it right here. If I click on that, just like any other parcel of land, it should pop me up a little information about who owns it here. All right, here we go. There's the parcel ID number, and it's in, oh, it goes across several sections. This, the legal description here says it goes across sections 7, 8, 9, and 10 of Township 2 North, range to east, and that it's 1,156 acres. And if I keep scrolling down here, oh wow, yeah, it's got even more parts attached to it. So you can find out lots of cool stuff about what this piece of land is included in today. And I can actually figure out who owns the thing. If you look, here's the address for the owner right there, the legal address of the owner. You can find the original OR, that stands for official record, book and page where the deed for this piece of property is recorded. So that's official record book 2330, page 1591. Okay, and looks like the owners of this piece of land are based out in Denver, Colorado. Now, who knows where the owners actually live? That just happens to be where the corporation is based. Okay, and let's see if it gives us any information on sales. Sometimes you can get information about the sales. And you can, by the way, you can change the size of the location of this window a little bit. You can also click on that and that'll widen it out a little bit, that little square up there. Let's see what else we can get here. It's not giving us any information on sales for this particular piece of property. However, if I were to look at another piece of property elsewhere, you oftentimes can get sale data on the data. So I'm going to pick something, another little parcel right over here. Let's say that I was looking at that and I wanted to look at the sales information on it. Let's see if they've got any. Yeah, see, here we go. We've got some information on sales. This piece of property was last sold in 2019. Here's the official book and page for the deed. And look, it's got a hyperlink, which means I'm actually going to be able to click on the current deed for this piece of property. And it's actually going to take me to that deed. All right. And then I can even look at the sale before that. It looks like the time that the land was sold before that was 1984. We can look at the sale price. Wow, that was a major jump in value from $25,000 to $500,000, or that's the sale price, not necessarily the value. But we can get the deed for that as well. Now, it won't give you every deed all the way back to the patents. That's why we've got other methods. We'll talk about that next, about how to find the previous owners of a piece of land. So essentially, by using this tool, we can now figure out not only what's going on in the neighborhood of a piece of land that an ancestor owned, we can also figure out who owns it now and maybe who the last couple of owners were. So just to recap, what we've done is we've explained how to use the public land survey system to locate where a piece of land described with that legal description, all that mumbo jumbo about the northeast quarter, the northwest quarter of section so-and-so, of township so-and-so, range so-and-so. We've talked about how to take that and actually use these online tools to turn that into a real live location and figure out what's located there now. So that's what we've done so far. Before we talk about how to go back the other direction and learn what used to be and who used to own a piece of property that you're looking at now, are there any questions before we proceed to that next bit? I'll hold for just a second, see if anything pops up in the chat. Otherwise, we'll proceed to the next section. All right. I'm not seeing any questions pop up, but if a question does pop up, and please feel free to put these in at other times if I already get started. If you're thinking about a question, you want to wait until the end, that's fine too. What I'll do is I'll answer that when I get to the next section. So let's flip this around on our head. What we've been doing so far is how to take those land documents that we talked about in part one, those federal patents, state patents, or deeds from private land transactions, and how to locate them in real space and figure out what's there now. Okay, we've talked about how to do that. But let's go back the other direction. What if you would like to learn who the first people were to own the piece of property where you live, or the piece of property where a major important landmark is? Like, who was the first people to own the land where Lake Piney Z is, in the little park on Lake Piney Z, or maybe Mission San Luis, or maybe something like that? How do you determine that? How do you go back and figure out who the first people were after United States acquisition of Florida to own that? Well, I'm going to show you. Best thing I can think of to do is to pick an example. And I didn't want to pick anybody's house or anything like that. So I'm going to use a fairly generic example here. There's a little gas station whenever I'm going to Perry, which is where I'm from. If I'm going down to visit mom and dad, there's a gas station that I always stop at on the way out of town because it's very convenient. There's usually not a whole lot of people there. Gas prices are usually about right. And I'm going to stay right here on the property appraiser's website because this is really the best tool to use to do this. And that gas station is located on Appalachia Parkway, almost out to W.W. Kelly. And so that's what I'm going to do. I need to go find, let's see, here we are. There's W.W. Kelly and Cheers Crossroads. And that gas station is located at the corner of Appalachia Parkway and Lavinia. Here's Lavinia. So this must be the gas station. Okay, let's pull up the parcel information on that. Okay, so here I am. I clicked on the parcel. I made sure that I had the little I button clicked here because that's the tool you use to whenever you click on something to get the information. And here's all that great information about who owns it now. It looks like we've got two owners, possibly a husband and wife, brother and sister, something like that. Dixit and Amisha Patel own that gas station. And yes, it says that this is in Section 9 of Township 1 South, Range 2 East. Okay, I'm going to write that down because I'm going to need that. I'm going to carry this information to other systems. So I know that I'm looking at Section 9 in Township 1 South, Range 2 East. And it doesn't tell me, let's see, oh, and it says it's in the western half. So that's going to help. The western half of Section 9. And it says it's in the western half, but I don't know how that land was originally sold. I'd also like to know kind of the north and south type idea of where it is in Section 9 here. So if I zoom out a little bit, it's still got that parcel highlighted. If I do a quick little look at the red square here that's showing me Section 9, I can quickly see that it's in the northwest quarter of that section. And if I had to guess, I'd also say that it's kind of, gosh, it's kind of hard to say whether it's in the northeast or northwest quarter of that northwest quarter. So you know something I might be able to do? Not saying this will work 100% of the time, but remember how we could go and look at old deeds that were for this piece of property? If I go back and look, there's a deed from 1997 in here. I wonder if there's a better legal description of this piece of property in here. And so I can actually click on this deed. Now, if for some reason the deed was not available, you could take this official record book and page and you could request a copy of this deed from the clerk of courts and you could get that information that way. Once you know a little bit about how these things work, you can plug these systems into each other and, sort of, even though they don't really talk to each other like we sometimes expect them to in today's very interconnected online world, you can be the brain that connects them together and makes them work for you. I want to see if I can get a little bit better legal description for that parcel. So I'm going to click on this deed from 1997 and see what it says. Now, this is essentially a 20th century version of that same chicken scratch handwritten federal land patent that we were looking at earlier, because it is going to have a legal description of some sort attached to it. All right. Here we go. And legal descriptions, if you haven't noticed, have gotten a little bit longer because we no longer use those square pieces, those aliquot parts to measure systems here. So let's see if we can figure out, okay, let's see. We want to find any place where it's going to give us a section, township, and range. All right, we've got corners of lots. We've got plat books, eastern right-of-way boundary, northwest corner of lot 52. No, I want a description of what township it's in and what range it's in. Okay, look at this. Okay, so they're actually referring us in this particular deed, they're referring us to a plat book and saying, oh, you want to know more about where the, where this is actually located in real space, you're going to have to go to the plat book. Let's see if it says anything in here at all about where this is located. Oftentimes in these legal descriptions, you will get a description, especially if it's not in a subdivision. Part of the issue here is that this piece of property is located in a subdivision, which means that in order for it to even exist as a piece of property, there has to be a plat book on file with the county that shows the exact boundaries of all the parcels within the subdivision and a description of the location of the subdivision itself within the section, township, and range grid here. Because of that, we're not going to get that in here, so we're going to have to be satisfied with the fact that it's in the western half of Section 9 of Township 1 South, Range 2 East. If this piece of property were outside of a subdivision, we might be able to do even better than that. But that's okay. We're still going to be able to find a good bit out about this. So let's see. What the heck were we doing? We're trying to figure out who had property here before now. Okay? So there's a couple of different tools you can use to do this. If you're wanting to get, you could do kind of what we've done here already and see how in this this little window here from the property appraiser's website, it's giving us the last 2 sales. Okay. What these are is these are deeds, you know, representing the actual sale of the land from one person to another. But these are obviously not the only 2 deeds that exist. Okay. We could actually trace further deeds back from this by going and searching for more deeds with the county clerk. Different counties do this differently. In Leon County, you can get deed information from the county clerk's office. Other counties that are larger sometimes have a position called the comptroller. For example, in Orange County and Broward County, you don't go to the clerk of courts to get deeds. You go to the county comptroller. It's whichever county you're looking for. It shouldn't take you very long on that county's website to determine exactly who you need to go to for official deed records. But what you can do is you can sort of do the same thing that an abstractor would do to figure out the chain of title for a piece of land. You go with the earliest deed you've got, okay, which is when somebody bought that piece of land. They were the grantee, if you will, if you remember that from part 1 where we were talking about grantors and grantees. And if you go to the county clerk's office or the comptroller's office or whatever, they will have the deeds indexed by grantor and grantee. So what you do is you take the earliest deed you've got and you find that one by looking for where the person who owns, the earliest person you can find to own the land, where they are a grantee. So you search the index for grantees and say, okay, if John Smith is the owner of the land, he buys it in 1984, I'm going to go look for a deed where John Smith is the grantee of this piece of land in 1984. All right, and then you figure out who sold the land to him, who is the grantor. All right, then the next step is to go look for that grantor as a grantee, and then go find that same piece of land where he's the grantee. Then figure out who the grantor was for that land transaction. And so you seesaw back and forth between grantor and grantee until you get back until you essentially get all the different owners that you want. That's one way to do it. And that's the way abstractors do it, because that's how you determine chain of title. You have to actually get all the owners. But I've got some shortcuts for you. Okay. We can actually take a couple of shortcuts. Number one, what if your question was so simple as, I just want to know who the first person was to own this piece of property? Who is the earliest piece of property? Well, for that, you don't need to do the grantor grantee, two-step like we were just doing earlier. We can actually use those records from the Bureau of Land Management. We can also use some records from the state of Florida to help us determine that. So let's see. Let's show you how to do the Bureau of Land Management version first. And thankfully, that is something that we can get to online. So let's say that I want to know who the first people were to own that piece of property where the Patels have this gas station on Appalachia Parkway. I want to know who owns that. So that's in the western half of Section 9, Township 1 South, Range 2 East. So now I'm going to go back to where we got that land catalog from the Bureau of Land Management. Okay, again, that's going to be glorecords.blm.gov. All right, and I want to search for land patents. Okay, and I'm going to search Florida, And just like I mentioned in part 1, never put more stuff into this system than you absolutely have to, because this sucker, if it's not Google, if you get one thing wrong, it'll kick a lot of your good search results out. So I know that the parcel that I'm interested in is in Florida. It's going to be in Township 1 South, Range 2 East, and I know that I want the Tallahassee Meridian. All right, I have not specified anything else. I didn't put the county, I didn't put the section, I didn't do anything like that. Actually, I probably should have put the section in there. Let me do the section. Let me do the section just because we are only interested in section 9. All right, so Florida, Township 1 South, Range 2 East, section 9, Tallahassee Meridian. There we go. That's a much shorter list of results. Praise heaven. Okay, now, as I look through here, what this is doing is this is showing me all of the times that the federal government patented out a piece of land directly from federal government ownership and titled that out to a private individual. And remember that we're looking for the western half of section 9. And remember, we looked at it and it looked like it was in the northwestern quarter of section 9, the northwestern quarter. So let's look over here where it's listing out all of these land patents, and let's see if we can find anything about the northwestern quarter. Let's see, we've got the eastern half of the southwestern quarter, western half of the southeastern quarter, northeastern quarter. The western half of the northwestern quarter. Oh, and the eastern half of the northwestern quarter. And wouldn't you know, the same guy owns both. The same guy owns both. Benjamin Chairs. Benjamin Chairs. Now, isn't that a familiar name? Not too far away, I mean less than half a mile from that gas station, is the Chairs Crossroads, where the Chairs Crossroads and then W.W. Kelly meet up with Appalachian Parkway, US 27, right there. Well, interesting. So it turns out that right there, that gas station where I get gas on the way to go see mom and dad every time I go down there, it turns out Benjamin Chairs, one of the founding members of the very powerful Chairs family here in Leon County, they were the original owners of that piece of property. It was patented out from the federal government on April 1st, 1826. And I can actually get the patent, a picture of the patent, to prove it. If you were with part 1, you'll remember that these sometimes take a while to load. Sometimes you have to go back out and come back, especially during times of peak usage. Now this one acts like that it's going to load, but you guys know what a federal land patent looks like so far, so we won't dwell on this particular one. So that's one tool. Just to review, what we just did was we just said, I know of a parcel in modern day ownership. It could be where your parents live, it could be where you live, it could be where a park is that you like to go to. It could even be a gas station that you go to a number of times on your way to work or to go visit somebody. And you can use the tools that we just talked about to find exactly who the first person was to own that piece of land. Now, there's one other piece to this. What if I don't just want to know who the first person was? Let's say that I also want to know who the subsequent owners were. Well, you're in luck. Counties every year, and if you're a landowner, you know this. Every year, landowners have to pay taxes on their property, of course. And that means that the property appraiser and the tax assessor have to determine what the value of that piece of property is. And then that gets turned into a document known as the tax roll. And that tax rolls have been created ever since the very earliest days of Florida's territorial existence. That process has changed only very slightly in 200 years, okay? And the great news for us genealogists is that those tax rolls, going back many years in many cases, are available either from the State Archives of Florida or from your county property appraiser's office or from your county clerk of courts. It's slightly different depending on which county you're looking at, who's going to have the tax rolls. It's been brought to my attention that some counties have ditched their tax rolls from a certain period, once you get really far back. They're required by law to keep them back to a certain point. They may have been required to keep the ones that they've gotten rid of, but at any rate, every county keeps these records a little bit different. You may have to do a little bit of calling around the courthouse to determine who's going to actually have the tax rolls that you need to look at. But essentially what I'm saying is those tax rolls have been kept since the 1820s, and you should be able to get your hands on it. Now, I will say that if you're looking at tax rolls before the 1870s, they tended not to actually record the aliquot parts of the parcels of land that somebody was being taxed on. They only included the acreage. But once you get to the 1870s, they actually start including the aliquot parts, those quarters of sections of townships and all those sorts of things. So let's look at an example to see how this actually works in practice. And I'm going to use my childhood home as this because I didn't have time to grab a Leon County tax roll on this. So I went and grabbed a Taylor County tax roll on this. And so I'm going to actually look at my childhood home as an example of how to do this. And you could do this with any piece of property in any county in the state of Florida. And this oftentimes works for counties in other states as well. So my childhood home, I actually know from using the tools that we've looked at today on the, I could have used the land catalog, I could have used the property appraiser's website for Taylor County. I happen to know that my childhood home is located in section 13 of Township 5 South, Range 7 East in Taylor County. So I acquired from the clerk of courts in Taylor County, I acquired a copy of the tax rolls. They got them microfilmed at some point down the line, and so they were able to send me a digitized copy of the microfilm. All right, so I'm going to make sure, let's see, I need to share this with you. It needs to be a different share. So can everybody now see this really god-awful copy of a microfilm page? Is that a yes?
Yep, okay. That's coming through.
Excellent. All right, and I promise I'm going to zoom in on it so that you can see it a little bit better. All right, so the way that they organize these is they don't organize them by name, unfortunately. Sometimes they come with indices. In this particular one, it doesn't matter because I have cracked the code on how they do actually have it organized. If I zoom in a little bit, they've actually got it organized by range and then by section. So if I look in here, they've actually got the aliquot part of the piece of property that's being described. Then they've got the section, the township, the range, and then they've got the owner name, and then they've got some gibberish in here about how they've got it evaluated for taxes. So what I need to do is I need to figure out where they have the information for Township 5 South, Range 7 East. 5-7, 5-7, here's 3-5, here's 5-5, here's 4-6, here's, oh, we're getting closer, 2-7, 2-7, 3-7, 3-7, 4-7, getting there, 4-7. Wow, there's a lot in 4-7. Oh, that's because the town of Perry's there, so all those town lots are going to be in there. That's why 4-7's taking forever. But eventually, eventually we're going to switch to 5-7. Look here at this piece I'm highlighting. Okay, so I am now seeing, these are all the people. By the way, this is the tax roll I pulled for the year 1900. They do these tax rolls every year, so there's a different one of these horrific gibberish pages. There's a different one for every year. I pulled the 1900 tax roll because I figured, hey, I just want to know who owned my childhood home property in 1900. Okay. Oh, by the way, I'm also going to get to figure out who the neighbors were. So this is section 1 in 5-7. I need section 13. So I'm going to keep following the section column here. Here's section 1, section 2, section 11, section 12. Aha! Section 13. Section 13 right here. Wow. Wow. So only 3 owners. As of 1900, only 3 people owned property in section 13. What that tells me is that somebody in here has got a lot of property in that area. So let's look and see who they are. Okay, so here we go. The eastern half of the northeastern quarter of section 13 was owned by a guy named E.B. McCrae. Now I happen to know that my piece of property, I went in and looked at the deeds and stuff, and I happen to know that it's in this next description. If I look at this long piece of stuff right here, this long piece of description, I can actually zoom in a little bit more here and might be able to see it a little better. So it looks like we've got another guy, sorry, this thing's jumping around, who owns the southwest quarter of the northeast quarter, the northeast quarter of the southwest quarter, the northern half of the southeast quarter, and the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 13 of Township 5 South, Range 7 East. It's this guy named J.W. Oglesby. Interesting, because J.W. Oglesby was actually the guy who built the South Georgia Railway into Perry. It was one of Perry's very first railroads, and it's the railroad that runs parallel essentially to US 221, running north into Shady Grove and then Greenville and Sermons, and then all the way up to Adel. So, and this guy is also the one who developed the property at Hampton Springs, which is a famous mineral resort in Taylor County. It's no longer in existence. You can still see the ruins of the park, but that's really cool. My childhood property used to be owned, the home where I grew up, it's on property that used to be owned by this very important guy to Taylor County history. There's no telling what kinds of secrets you can unlock about the piece of property that you own or a piece of property that you're interested in just by using these tax rolls. So just to review what we did in this case, our objective here was to determine who the original owner and who the owner at any particular time we want to determine was of a particular parcel of land. I know that my childhood home was in this particular section, so I could have used the Bureau of Land Management's land patent lookup system. I could have figured out who the first person was to own that property. Or if I wanted to just determine who owned that piece of property at a specific time, then I would go to a tax roll for that. I decided I wanted to know who owned the property in 1900, so I went to my county officials and I obtained a copy of the 1900 tax roll for Taylor County, and I went in that tax roll to that section and to that piece of section that's in the legal description for my mom's piece of property. And it turns out that I could figure out not just who owned that piece of property, J.W. Oglesby, but also who the neighbors were in that same section, E.B. McCrae, and this guy, I happen to know that that's Joseph L. Hampton, who was another owner of Hampton Springs. So some really cool stuff that you can do with these tools. And the greatest thing about it is it's not like the old days. You don't have to go traveling all over the earth to go to courthouses and do this research. A lot of the databases you need are already online, and if it's not online, these are very easy, simple, easy to describe documents that you can request over the phone. I think that we have come to the end of our time today, and hurrah, we actually made it relatively in time. So I am ready at this time to take any questions that you might have about the program, about what we've talked about here, any questions that have arisen during the course. If you will, put them into the chat, into the textual chat there, and I'll answer them. I'm going to put my email address, my direct contact information up on the screen, so that if you've got a longer question or maybe you need to take some time to formulate your question, you'll have this information. I'm going to put that into the chat. Thank you, Evelyn, so much. I really appreciate that, letting me know that you enjoyed the program. Thank you, Paul. Absolutely, and it does not have to end here. I realize that, you know, even though I tried to make this a step-by-step, you know, recipe book of how to do this work, when you get in there and you're in the wilderness, you know, looking at these records, sometimes it can be difficult. You may run into cases that are an anomaly of some sort. If you run into trouble, please feel free to drop me an email. I would be glad to help you decode some of the labyrinthine documents that are land documents.